Okay, we're going to pick up with the New Deal comes under attack. So there were many critics of FDR's New Deal plan. One main criticism was that the New Deal required what's called deficit spending. You could probably guess what that means. Deficit spending is when the government is spending more money than it's receiving or collecting. So it's furthering the government's debt levels because they're actually spending more money than they actually have or are making on these New Deal programs, creating all these jobs. And at the same time, the New Deal's not completely eliminating the Depression. We saw critics from both liberal and conservative individuals. Liberal critics actually criticized, saying that the New Deal did not go far enough, saying that the federal government should have been providing more in federal aid, whereas conservative critics are the ones more concerned about deficit spending, saying that the government should not be spending money on these programs. They kind of take more of a Herbert Hoover approach, that people need to bail themselves out of hard times and the government should take more of a back seat. So liberals saying the government's doing too much, saying the government's not doing enough, and conservatives saying the government's doing too much. Now the Supreme Court does react by actually ruling that two of the New Deal programs were unconstitutional, and that was the NIRA and the AAA. So both of those programs were eliminated because they were ruled as unconstitutional. Now, I did want to go over one specific critic of the New Deal, and that is Louisiana Senator Huey P. Long, who we are all very familiar with, especially having studied Louisiana history at some point. Huey Long originally kind of supported the New Deal, but he actually has an agenda to become the president himself one day. And many of us have learned that. Huey was a very, very ambitious Louisiana politician. Having served as senator and governor, he has future ambitions to become president. He kind of developed his own plan called Share Our Wealth, in which it's very extreme, actually. I don't know if many Louisiana residents actually know what it would mean, but essentially it'd be dividing up, the riches of some of the wealthiest American citizens, basically putting a cap on how much you could make in a given year and divvying out the rest that you make or that you earn. Very socialist, actually. I don't necessarily need you to know that much about Share Our Wealth, but I do want you to know that Huey Long felt that FDR could have done more, and his program that he was supporting was actually even more extreme and would have cost more in federal funding. Okay, now we're starting to see, kind of towards the end of FDR's first term, some of these New Deal programs that started off very successful, but they're starting to fade out, and in the end there's still issues that need to be addressed. And so we're going to see what's called the Second New Deal. Okay, first of all, we have the second 100 days. FDR basically calls Congress to provide even more extensive relief and start pushing future and further legislation. Now, Eleanor Roosevelt is a huge part of this story. Eleanor is FDR's wife, the First Lady. She was a humanitarian, a social reformer, very educated. She had a lot of ideas, and she really pushes her husband to do more. She says that more needs to be done. She spends a lot of her time traveling around the country, observing people's conditions and taking note of who needs help and what kind of aid needs to be given to the people. And she's very active as First Lady. She really sets the role of First Lady as the standard of how an active First Lady should carry herself. Now, that's going to help come into play with the election of 1936, which would be when FDR is first up for re-election. Okay? Now, FDR won this election by a large majority. Okay? And this kind of shows the American people putting faith in FDR's plans and hoping that he's going to be able to follow through with providing aid and relief for the Great Depression. You know, things weren't completely well in the economy, but the fact that they didn't toss him aside like Herbert Hoover shows they don't blame it on him, and they are at least faithful that his work will benefit them in the long run. Okay, and the last thing I want to talk about today is kind of an extension of New Deal programs. We see some adjustments or some new programs coming into play that are part of Roosevelt's second New Deal. And these are ones that you've already defined. I just want to go over them, and I want you to know these as part of the second New Deal and not the first New Deal. It's just 3. So we have the WPA, which is the Works Progress Administration, obviously just creating a large amount of jobs in various sectors of construction. This picture on the screen, I don't know if it's cut off because of the screencast, but you can kind of see this is in Tiger Stadium, and you can kind of tell it is in the bottom left corner, but it's the marching band spelling out WPA, advocating for the Works Progress Administration. Now, the NYA, the National Youth Administration, was created to provide education, jobs, and relief and counseling to young people, high school students, college students, and it's just kind of really reaching out to the youth. And then lastly, of course, the Social Security Act. And this was an act that provided pensions or retirement money for old age workers, benefits for victims who, had endured any kind of accident or injury on the job. Also provided aid for those with disabilities. And the Social Security Act does make Americans feel more secure overall, but remember, it is not meant to be your only retirement plan, even though it's still here today. All right, we're going to pick up on Monday when we come back with the rest of the notes, finishing out the last of the effects of the New Deal, like the impact of the New Deal, and then just a little bit more about the culture of the 1930s. Write down any questions you'll have, and I'll see you on Monday.